Welcome to the Franklin Method Fellowship. I'm your co-host Solange Ross, and I'm joined by my colleague Deborah Chassie. We are physical therapists specializing in the pelvic floor. In this podcast, we share our passion for the Franklin Method and integrating it into functional, everyday movements, all forms of exercise, and our physical therapy practices. We also share a love for talking about the pelvic floor. We hope to inspire you to move better and feel better in your body. Always check with your doctor before beginning an exercise program. This podcast is not intended to be used as medical advice. Let's grab your Franklin Method balls and bands. Enjoy the show.
Good morning. Welcome to episode 6 of the Franklin Method Fellowship. And today we're going to be talking about the pelvic floor and doing some great movements. So we're really looking forward to you joining us. And I'm Deborah Chassie. And with me, I have Solange Ross.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. So we're really excited for you to join us. And we're going to be doing some movements with the Franklin Method exercises that we believe, you will notice a change in your pelvic floor strength and relaxation by the end of this episode. So let's get back to the basics of pelvic floor function. Why do we have a pelvic floor? And what's the purpose of it? And what do we want to focus on? Solange, what do you think?
Well, in our last episode, we definitely got into that. So just certainly for continence. So to keep things in when they need to be in, and then when we need to eliminate, to let things out and flow freely. And we talked about the emotional aspect of the pelvic floor for protection, where if there's any kind of trauma, emotional or physical trauma to the body, the pelvic floor will react to that. And we want sex to be enjoyable for everyone and the pelvic floor to be a source of pleasure. And anything else that I missed?
I don't think so. And I think the important thing, first, we just want to appreciate all of those things and have that in our mind as we're going through this too. And, we've talked about breathing and how important breathing is. And when we take a breath in, our pelvic floor actually relaxes. So why don't we just take a big breath in and let it out. Just feel that in our pelvis as we breathe in and let it out, just as a way to start. One more time, breathe in and let it out.
And maybe just so that people who aren't so familiar with the pelvic floor and have not maybe listened to our first class that we did, just to have a sense of where they're trying to sense the pelvic floor. So I'm focusing around my sit bone. So we mapped out last time the landmarks being the sit bones, the pubic bone, and the tailbone. So when we're doing this nice breath, if people want to focus in and around those landmarks to see if they can sense that relaxation.
Right. Yeah, that's really good. And, something else that I wanted to bring up too is when people do a pelvic floor contraction. So some people may call it a Kegel and others may call it a pelvic floor contraction or pelvic floor relaxation or elongation. So during a contraction, sometimes I've seen people grip their glutes or hold their breath or tighten the inside of their thighs. And that's not what we're talking about. And so we're actually talking about the inside muscles that are contracting together during a pelvic floor contraction or a Kegel.
And I think too, and I love that you mentioned gripping the glutes and the inner thighs, because the amount that's required for a pelvic floor contraction is actually very low level effort. And I think it's possible that maybe this idea of gripping comes from, today in the exercise world, people want to feel something and feel the burn, and this idea that it's got to feel like something. So they use much more effort than what's required to make something happen. So I think maybe that idea from like pulling the glutes and the inner thighs, all these things, versus really just getting it from the pelvic floor and letting it work in just the right amount. And that's what I love about the Franklin method exercises, because it almost just allows your body to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and last episode we talked about closing the book. Right. Yep. And so that is at such a low level of a contraction of the pelvic floor. So, yeah.
And too, like, it's so interesting because I love watching people's facial expressions and just watching their body when they're doing exercises. And really, when you're doing a pelvic floor contraction, you should not see anything else moving. Maybe something in the eyebrows a little bit or something here, but it should not be visible. And if we're getting this big glutes coming on, big abdominals, then we're using way too much effort. And get that idea that it's low level, just the right amount. And would it even make sense to do this contraction that we would have to like pull in to go to the bathroom? Like, why would we, or to hold things in, why would we need to have this huge amount of support to do that?
Right. We don't need to have a lot of effort to contract.
Not a lot of effort. And two, what we're going to show you today is really a dynamic approach to pelvic floor training versus just isolated Kegels. But we have to understand where the muscles are and to sense and feel them, and we're going to then bridge them into full body movement.
Right.
So I just want to throw out the question to everyone too. What have you all heard about pelvic floor training? Because I think that's an important conversation to have.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people are told to grip, to like pull in and lift, but they compensate when they do it, so that's where they get the glutes tightening or the adductors squeezing in between their legs.
And also, Debbie, to the idea that we need more strength, because when I do my evaluations, I actually find that many people need the opposite, that they need to have this balance, that what they've been doing is overdoing the pulling up and in, and they haven't gotten the relax and let go and elongate. So It's the balance between that range of that we want that full range of motion in the pelvic floor. And the way you do that is not just by sitting in one position and doing a pelvic floor contraction. It's really getting the pelvis moving in conjunction with the full body, with walking, with our functional movements.
Right. And if one side is too tight and you're walking, you're going to actually alter your gait. It's not going to be 100% functional. And so I think it's the elongation, what you talk about, is really important. When I evaluate patients, one thing that I do is in standing, I put my hands on their hip bone. So it's actually on the greater trochanter. So that if you go to I'm going to show you where the greater trochanter is. And so here is the iliac crest. So right here is the iliac crest. And if you put your hands on your iliac crest and slide down, you feel that bump right there. And so when a person I'm evaluating them and they're in standing, I put my hands right here, and then I ask them to do a pelvic floor contraction. So this will give me a lot of information functionally, what their pelvic floor is doing. And what I'm looking for is, are they contracting symmetrically, or are they gripping in their glutes or tightening in their adductors? And so if you put your hands there right now and just go ahead and do a pelvic floor contraction. And you feel that equally. So all of you can do this at home right now. And there's another way to do it too that I like to do. Remember the book closing? Well, you could do another one where imagine bringing the tailbone, and you're going to do it in your mind only. Imagine bringing your tailbone to the backside of your pubic bone. And that's right there. I mean, oh my goodness, you can really feel what the pelvic floor is doing. Or how about this one? Imagine you have a zipper from your pubic bone up to your belly button, and imagine zipping up. Oh, I like that one.
I like the zipper, and I know a lot of people too will think of the zipper also as sort of like an arrow pointing upwards towards their midline, also like this idea of an arrow moving up.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Right. So that's a good way to check it. And then another way. So here's your iliac crest, the top of your pelvis. And if you just kind of slide down to the bump in the front and come in, and right there is your transverse abdominis muscle. So you can do the same movement, whichever one you liked. So either tailbone to the backside of your pubic bone, imagine doing that, or the zipper going from your pubic bone to your belly button, or the arrow pointing up. And just notice what your transverse abdominis does. And does one side contract before the other side? Or is one side silent and not contracting? So one thing that I find a lot of times is that there's asymmetry. One side is tight, the other side is weak. And so the tight side, well, it could be like an elevator too. So, you know, you want to start at the first floor on an elevator and go to the second, then to the third floor, then to the fourth floor. But if you're already at the third floor going to the fourth floor, you don't have much room for a contraction, do you? So you're already starting tight and then you're gripping up. And so you want to be able to relax the pelvic floor so you can start at the first floor and go up to the fourth floor. So
that's such a beautiful explanation too, because thinking about that, if we don't pay attention and notice, right? And if one side we're starting at a higher up floor, and then we're just doing our Kegel contractions, then we're just reinforcing that tight side. And guess what? This other side is probably being pulled over towards the tight side too, or who knows what's even happening. So it's reinforcing that asymmetry. So it's super important to get that balance from right to left. And then another thing that I see too is coordination. That it's not only that there's tight and weak, but it's a coordination of the pelvic floor and getting the pelvic floor to react to movement. It's almost like the muscles get turned off so they don't work as they should, to bring back that coordination. And one thing what I will do in my when I do my exam, so I'll look externally at the pelvic floor and we'll look together with the patient. And with the Franklin method approach, rather than me just telling my findings, I'm really there to give the patient an experience in their body and to have them be on the journey with me. So while we look externally, I will have them put their hand on their vulva, on their perineum, and we're looking at breath. And this can be a huge aha moment for them. Do they feel that tissue moving into their hand? Do they feel that tissue moving up and away from their hand? And I'm not talking large scale movements. We're talking very, very small millimeters of movement. But that sensation, them having their hand on the perineum, they can then say, yes, I do feel movement relaxing into my hand. I do feel a lifting away. Or I've had the experience where sometimes they'll do a contraction and what they thought was pulling up and in was actually bearing down. And that was a huge moment. So,
Yeah, right. And I've seen that happen so many times too. Yeah, so beautifully put as an explanation of the pelvic floor exam. And, sometimes we do internal pelvic floor exams, but I really find we get so much information by doing it externally. Don't you, Solange?
there's so much that we can do externally, and it's great for it. The beauty of it is that anyone can practice on their own doing the externally, and it doesn't have to be bare. It can be with clothes on, just to feel around the landmarks, and that is just a huge, so much information we can get from the external exam. And then the internal exam can come at a later time, or there are many people who are not comfortable with it, so then we can just proceed and work with the information that we have from the external exam.
Right. And I like people to, I actually prefer not to do the internal exam in the beginning, just like what you're saying, because it's so personal. You know what I mean? And I just think that it's better for people to get comfortable with you, with your hands, how they're being touched, so that they know whether or not, they're willing to be that vulnerable. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think too, when someone comes to us, it's not your typical evaluation. It's a little more of a lengthy evaluation, and we're understanding the story. And this is an exam that it should not be rushed through. It's not like sometimes when you go to a doctor's office and they're just quick in and out doing a pap smear. Let's get this over as quickly as possible. This is really an informative exam. So it's not something that can happen quickly. So I prefer doing it on the second or sometimes third visit, because you have developed that rapport. They do feel safe. So you can then spend the time, and they also know a little bit more about the pelvic floor, and they've practiced some exercises. So they're going to get more out of the exam as well. But again, it's absolutely not necessary for everyone.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, there's plenty. I'd say I do 50-50. If someone is expecting it and wanting it, the pelvic floor internal exam, then I'll do it. But I always give them the option that they don't have to, that I have enough information externally to treat them and to help strengthen and relax their pelvic floor.
And two, people are often surprised when they come in. There's a lot of other stuff that we look at in terms of movement of the spine, movement of the pelvis, evaluating breathing. So they may be coming what their expectations are for this exam. And it's like, well, we got to look at some other stuff first before we get there. So we got to kind of set that aside for now.
Yeah. That's great. I'm glad that you do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we get into movements, or do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
I think we should get into movements, but maybe let's do just a quick check-in on our pelvis. Maybe let's stand up and check in and see what we can sense and feel in our pelvic floor. And see if we can, as we notice posture or levels of tension, breathing, if we can sense, is there a little bit of asymmetry in our pelvic floor? But not commenting or judging on it, just noticing. Welcome back.
That was
your
awesome.
check-in. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, and if you were to say, and I didn't know the Franklin method, if you were to say on a scale of 0 to 10, what was your experience? I would say a 10. However, I know after doing the movements that we're going to do, that 10 is going to be more than a 10. So technically it's not a 10. How about yours?
My check-in was good. And what's interesting, so I noticed more tone on one side of my body, my right side, which tends to be my grippier side. And I think I noticed that too, because in your assessment, when we had our hands here and you said do the pelvic floor contraction, that was so this was so obvious to me that the right side just pulled up more, even more so when I had my hands on my hips, because I know that it's not from my glutes and my thighs being more active. It's more a little bit coming from my obliques and my abdominal wall. So that was really interesting to me, just to stay with that, to notice that pattern, but then also just to notice other things and just to see out as I was checking in if that could even shift.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. What I was noticing is that as I was breathing, because one thing that you said is focus on your breath. So as I was breathing, I just felt this nice elongation between the sit bones, just kind of like supported, right? And that's what the pelvic floor muscles do. Even during lengthening, they actually are basically just sliding apart to be able to handle that load coming in. And that's how I like to look at it, is the pelvic floor is saying, I gotcha. So let me let you down easy. And then we're going to go ahead and bring you back up.
And I love the way you describe that, because I think this idea of lengthening or relaxation can be a scary idea for people. But if it's the idea that, no, I gotcha, and that the muscles aren't letting go, they're lengthening, and it's actually this lengthening contraction, which is a stronger contraction than a shortening contraction. If you think about what makes you more sore at the gym, is it doing squats where you're doing something like this, or if you're doing something going down slow, they call these eccentric contractions. Right. It's that lengthening. This is the stronger contraction.
Those really is. Yeah.
To lower slowly.
Yeah, that is more important, that you've got, because what we're looking at being really important is the I gotcha part, but also not only do I gotcha, but also if I need to let anything out, that it will let out what it needs to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you know what else I was doing when we were doing that is I was thinking about something in my head, like how can our thoughts affect our pelvic floor? And so here you and I were presenting, right? And we're sharing. And so my first thought was, I'm nothing. I'm just here to share my experiences to help all of you. And oh my goodness, that's what made it so wonderful, was because it was just so relaxed and just letting go, and then, lifting back up just so gently.
I love that. And that's
important.
And that's a great thing to share too, like that, like I'm here to support all of you and to share with you, versus sometimes when we check in, we sense and feel things, we can get so much into our head and get into our story. And especially if someone is dealing with pelvic pain or something, there can be a focus on a painful sensation. But I love the idea of just a blank canvas. Like, let's start as like a blank canvas, and what can we notice and feel, and calling in different images, maybe just like a widening and a narrowing, or a lengthening from tailbone to pubic bone, or something other than our story. it can just be such a beautiful experience, just changing our overall narrative. There can be so much power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Love the way you explain that. So why don't we get into some movements? Do you have anything else to add?
I'm ready to move.
All right. And I want to show you, since I'm not at home, I did manage to find a rubber band. So I'm going to be using this every now and then, but I just want you to notice that this is actually a hair tie and how it lengthens and shortens, right? So it's letting go and then coming together. So we're going to be using that concept a lot as we're doing this. So first, what we're going to do, Solange, you were talking about squats.
Yeah.
So first, what we're going to do is I want you to find your sit bones. So the way you can find your sit bones is, again, put your hands on the top of your pelvis, which is the iliac crest. And if you come down towards the back and stick your butt out like that, you can feel the bones that you sit on. Yeah. So that's what we're going to focus on. And what we're going to do is bend our hips and knees. So again, is if you bend your hips and knees like this, then and put your hands on your sit bones, you can actually feel your sit bones sliding apart. And then when you come back up, sliding together. So this is a great way to strengthen the pelvic floor. I had a patient who she had done work with somebody else doing Kegels and biofeedback. And then she just dropped all of that and did only this. And within a few weeks, she had a very strong pelvic floor. So, all right. So hands on the sit bones. And if it's too hard to reach back like that, put your hands on the sit bones. You can just put them in front. And so you're going to slide apart during hip and knee flexion and slide together. And it's good to use an image. We talked about how important the brain is and our thoughts. So how about imagining a flower blooming as you lower, and then as you come together, it closing up. Sometimes flowers do that, right? When the light changes. Or how about a diamond shape? Sliding apart, sliding together. And again, sliding apart, sliding together. And I'm going to show you with my hands. Imagine the diamond widening, changing its shape, and then coming back together. And you want the diamond to widen on all four ends, correct?
Yes. And I'm trying it so that my diamond or my flower, that widening is happening evenly on both sides.
Yeah.
And that's really going to help that imagining that movement even on both sides, trying to match that as I move, following that image of, yes, now I'm with the petals. The petals are opening. And then the petals on both sides, they're closing.
Yeah.
That's going to help undo those asymmetries that we have in our body.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And remember how before we started this, we put our hands on our greater trochanter. So on the hip bones, where we slide down and feel that bone. And after doing that, then go ahead and just imagine closing the book or doing a Kegel. And see, does it feel more even? And then what if you...
It does.
Yay, just one exercise. And it changed it. And then the other thing too, to breathe in. So we did some breathing in the beginning. So breathe into that pelvic bowl and just imagining that widening. I like to picture the widening of the sit bones floating apart. And does there seem to be more room into that bowl?
Yes. Absolutely. Having just moved through this full range of motion, I can now just as I stand and sense breathing, I feel like I'm filling out the whole container of my pelvis.
Yeah.
I feel more three-dimensional. I love that.
And do you ever have people that can't hip flex and bend as easily? Maybe they have knee pain or foot pain. And so you don't have to do a lot of movement. I mean, literally, most people sit in a chair, correct? So literally it could be like you're sitting in a chair, right? So just a little bit of movement will do it. And a lot of it is coming from the mind.
That's exactly it. And have a chair behind you so you feel safe. So it's something that someone associates with what they do during the day. So it's not so scary of an exercise.
Right. And that's actually what I'll do too, is if they're having trouble, like, oh, I can't do that movement, then I have them sit down, and then I teach them from the sitting to standing position, because everybody does that. Right.
Absolutely.
So they're overexerting. Yeah. And you don't have to do it many times to start off with either. You could just do, say, 3-5 times to, start building that up.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's take this movement, but let's bring it into what we call open chain, which is like walking. So we're going to look at what the pelvic floor does when we lift a leg up. And we could do it either in standing, but if you need something to hold on to and you need a chair, you can absolutely use a chair for support to hold on. So I'm feeling at my sit bone again on one side, and I'm just going to lift the leg up. So I'm bringing the leg into hip and knee flexion. And I'm sensing what is happening to my sit bone.
I can feel it going forward when I lift the leg up.
So as we lift the leg up, it swings forward. And then as we lower the leg down, it swings back. So we can all say sit bone forward, sit bone back. Sit bone forward, sit bone back. Sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone forward, sit bone back. And then let's notice our right side compared to our left side around the sit bone. And maybe stand on your right side or the practice side, whichever it was for you, and bend into that knee. So I'm checking my balance on my one side compared to the other side. So I can sense more shakiness on the side that I didn't practice. And I have this sense of overall just nice support around the sit bone. On the practice side, it feels full, versus on the other side, it kind of feels a little gripped up to me. How's your experience, Deborah?
Yeah, it was great. So I did notice a big difference between the two. The first thing I noticed was that on the side that I practiced, it just felt so supported, especially initially. And so if I went to the side that I didn't practice, what I noticed is just that first initial lifting, that I didn't have the same strength as I did on the side that I practiced, where it was just smooth with that initial lifting to support my body in one leg stance compared to this. I don't know if you can see the difference, but I can feel the difference. And that felt so much better. And even when I put my hands back on my greater trochanter down here, that felt a lot stronger when I did the Kegel.
I'm curious. So for me, I did my dominant side. So I'm curious as I do my non-dominant side, how that's going to affect that feeling of strength.
And that was my non-dominant side that I did.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's balance out the other side. So we're going to lift up into hip and knee flexion and use a chair for support, or you can hold onto a wall. Sit bone forward, sit bone back. And what's really happening as we do this is as the sit bone comes forward, we're getting kind of a diagonal stretch of the pelvic floor from sit bone to sit bone. So if you can think about this diagonal stretch as the leg comes forward, sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone forward, sit bone back.
Can you see my band as we're doing that?
Great.
So hopefully others could see it too.
So I'm just noticing now just this nice sense of fullness on both sides. And then I'm going to check my balance again on my left side. Feels so much better. I don't have, it's almost like it was just a little bit of shakiness throughout the whole limb as a whole. Whereas on the practice side now, it feels very, very supported, stable.
I feel that is so awesome. And I feel so much support in my transverse abdominis muscle. So that's that band of muscle that comes across. And as soon as I stood up and noticed my posture, I just felt, wow, my posture feels so good.
I just did your assessment again. So having my hands inside, just inside and up from the ASIS, the bones that stick out in the front.
Oh, right.
And I can feel my non-dominant side turning on more, which I love. So
That's fantastic.
It's so great to do these little quick assessments after, just to see that, like, yes, I am pulling in and recruiting the side that needs a little bit more work. And it makes everything that we're doing a little more targeted.
Yeah.
So are you ready for the combo? Should we combine it?
Yeah, go ahead. Do that.
So we're going to combine what Debbie did with the lifting of the leg. So we're going to get a little bit more motion, and we can always hold on and use the chair. So we're going to do sit bone forward, sit bone back, then sit bone out, sit bone in. So forward, back, out, in. The diagonal stretch of the pelvic floor, then the widening and the narrowing. Sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone out, sit bone in. Or allow the petals to open. Here the flower blooms. Here the petals close. Here the petals are opening on one side, then they're closing, then they're opening again. Or maybe it's the diamond shape. Can you sense that shape change in the diamond as you go through the movement? So this is how something that's a little bit more aerobic-y can really become a dynamic pelvic floor exercise. Did you like that one, Deborah?
I love that one. It feels so dancey.
Yeah, we're dancing.
You know what? I'm feeling the lengthening in my neck too from doing that.
Oh, I love that.
There is a direct correlation between up here and into the pelvic floor. It just feels long. I'm probably taller. Have you noticed that sometimes your perception changes of your height?
Absolutely.
And I just feel like I can take a nice big breath into my diaphragm. Like I just feel it relaxed. Great. I love that, Solange.
Should we do the other side?
Absolutely.
Let's get that pelvic floor dancing.
Yeah. Need a little music now.
We need the music. So sit bone forward, sit bone back, sit bone out, sit bone in, sit bone forward, back, out, in. Flowers blooming, petals closing, petals opening again, then closing. Follow the shape of your flower. Or you could think about sit bone to sit bone, how it would stretch and widen here and narrow. And the beauty about this is if you wanted to take it a little bit faster, you could do that, or you could take it slow, 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 slow. It could be at different speeds. You know, it doesn't always have to be slow and controlled. We want to get this pelvic floor reactive and automatic, right? So we got to do that and train it at different speeds and vary things.
Right. That feels so fantastic. Just feels so lifted. You know, we all want a nice flat belly too, right?
And that's another thing to notice is how the abdominal wall changes as we go through these exercises. And I definitely can feel a nice level of support at the abdominal wall. And I love that I didn't even do anything practicing pulling my navel into my spine or relaxing out and letting go. We were just following an image for the pelvic floor and sensing what's happening in the sit bones. And we let the abdominal wall just organize itself around that image.
So natural. And the other thing that I feel too is right here in my back, my mid-back muscles feel really supported. Isn't that amazing?
That's a great spot too, because, you know, for me, that this can be a tricky spot. I know my tendency is to kind of arch and lift up from here rather than having support from my pelvis. I have a lot of movement up in there. So to feel nice support without it being something like that, flaring open the ribs, that's such a beautiful sensation to feel really supported around that area.
Yeah, that is. So when you walk, do you have a tendency and you need to turn, do you have a tendency to turn to the right or to the left? So if you're getting up from a couch, for example, and you have a choice, you can either go to the right or go to the left. Which direction do you have a tendency to go towards?
I think it would be my dominant side. So I think it would be my right side.
That is so true. And so after we did this, I was thinking of that, of going for a walk. In other words, going for a walk and turning around. And I actually felt like I could turn to my non-dominant side.
I'm going to try that right now. Let's all walk. Let's all walk and let's turn to our non-dominant side.
And then let's try turning to our dominant side.
They both feel pretty good to me right now, which is
I know, don't they? I know.
To feel that accessibility. And I'm so happy that you brought this up because it's things like that, just turning to the non-dominant side that we can really use to help balance out these patterns that we have, these automatic patterns that show up in the body. So if we become aware of that, it's the same thing like when we get dressed, we're putting our leg into one pair of one side of the pants first. That's the more natural side. Right. So if we try to, well, no, let's put in the left leg first, put the left sock on, put the left arm into the shirt. All of those things, you've got me so excited on how all of this will influence my pelvic floor.
And sometimes when my partner and I go for a walk, he likes to walk backwards to strengthen his glutes, to help strengthen his knees. And I'll do a little bit of that, but then I started thinking, I know that when I turn to my left, I'm not as strong. And so what I'll do is I'll walk and I'll turn to the right and keep walking. And then I'll turn to the left. and keep walking, just so that I can balance things out in my body.
Another idea too about just like being playful on a walk and maybe walk to the side a little bit, walk this way, rather than it just being like, I've got to move from point A to point B. There's many different ways that we can move from point A to point B. And maybe we can walk a little bit lower. Maybe we can walk a little bit higher, on diagonals.
Such great ideas. I love that.
With the awareness of our sit bones, right?
Sit bones walk us. How about that?
Have your sit bones walk you. Like, just randomly move and let your sit bones do whatever they want to do. Let them walk you. You've got a leash on the sit bone and it's just pulling you, right? You have puppet strings in front of you. You're pulled by your sit bones. And you can be pulled backwards by your sit bones too. I'm being pulled backwards now.
I love my sit bones just guiding me. They go where they want to go.
They go where they want to go. Let them go. That was fun.
That feels so freeing. Well, why don't we look at the obturator internus muscle? Do you have your pelvis with you by any chance?
I do.
Would you show us again the obturator internus muscle?
Yeah. So what we looked at last time was the obturator internus. So if you see my pelvis, it fills out the obturator foramen. So it's in yellow here. And then if you look from the inside, I think that's a good view. We talked about how the red, which is our levator ani muscles, that they actually insert into the obturator internus. So they connect into the fascia of the internus. And then where that muscle actually goes is from the, let's see how I can show this. If you imagine from the inside, it's then going to exit and wrap around the sit bone. So it comes around the sit bone and then it goes to the hip. So it goes to the greater trochanter, but inside this groove on the greater trochanter. So if we can imagine going from the front lateral walls of the pelvis, just a connection from there to the greater trochanter of the hip on both sides, the greater trochanter of the feet.
And so something that I want to begin with is just to test each side before we do this. So what I want everyone to do is you can hang on to something if you want to, something close to you, maybe a chair, bring a chair close, and just do a little bit of hip and knee flexion. And I just want you to slide your heel out and in. And just notice how that feels compared to the other side, out and in. So I'm going to choose the side that feels a little bit more restricted. And I don't know if you noticed it when I did this, but it was my left side. So to you, it may look like my right side, but in any case, this is my left side. What we're going to do first is I want you to palpate where it inserts on the greater trochanter, which is on your hip. And I'm going to show you. So here's the iliac crest, and you're going to slide down to that bump. And you're going to go to the top of the bump and walk towards the back of it. And right here, it might be a little bit tender. I just want you to rub just the one side. And just a little bit of rubbing to wake up that obturator internus muscle.
I'm unweighting my leg a little bit. And that's like helping me rub around.
That's a good idea. So I'm going to use the chair and try that out. So you're unweighting while you're rubbing?
Yeah, that just gives me a little bit more access because when I have my weight on the leg, I just feel the muscles a little more active and pushing into my hand. And then when I unweight it, then I just get like the thigh muscles, they just loosen up more so I can really get around the back of the.
Well, and what we should do too is go ahead and put your hand on your sit bone again. So go ahead and unweight your leg. Hand on the sit bone. And then what you're going to do is you're going to reach in to feel that obturator internus muscle. There. And if you wiggle your leg in and out a little bit, you might be able to feel that. That's where the obturator internus muscle is.
It might also be a very, very tender spot for people, because I know for me, like that, it's a little tender there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be very tender. That's a place where I always check when I'm doing the evaluation. So let's do this. So you can hold on, and hopefully you can see me well enough. And what you're going to do is bend at the hips and knees and slide your heel out and back in and out and in. And what I'm going to do is while I'm doing that, I'm going to rub that insertion. Or you could tap.
I've got a nice like sandwich in between my hands. So I've got my, like 2 of my fingers hooked around the sit bones. And then my thumb is around the back of the greater trochanter. So I feel like a little like sit bone greater trochanter sandwich happening.
All right. Or you could put your one hand on the greater trochanter and the other hand right where the femur head is. That would be another spot. So sliding your heel out and in and out. And as you're sliding out, think of that rubber band. And that rubber band is lengthening and shortening. And lengthening and shortening.
Yeah, I really find it hard. It's hard for me to really get that full internal rotation, that full lengthening. Not an easy exercise.
No, it's not.
It also does, it requires some strength on your standing leg too.
Right, so if you need to support yourself while you're doing it, and that makes it easier.
I'm also noticing on this side, I don't know if it's possible for you guys, how my foot and my lower leg is trying to compensate and help with the internal rotation. It's like I'm sort of getting this sickling of my ankle a little bit to try to give me more internal rotation. So I'm glad I noticed that, because I'm just going to now focus more on just it coming from the hip.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. And also, you don't have to do too many of them to notice a change. So let's go ahead and stand and notice your posture and your breath after doing one side. And how about if you bring your arms straight up compared to the other side? And stand on one leg that you just did compared to the other leg. Oh, there's a big difference there. And then what about if you kick your leg? Kick and kick. So the one that I did actually feels longer. Feels like there's more hamstring lengthening.
Definitely. And I can definitely feel more tone in that other hamstring.
How do you feel when you stand on the one leg?
Much more stable.
Yeah. Oh, big difference. Well, I think we ought to do the other side, huh?
Yeah.
So let's go through that again. Find your greater trochanter. So from the iliac crest down, and go ahead and just rub that. So here's the greater trochanter. It's about like this, maybe not quite that big, but about that big. I'm going to the top and then towards the back. And then you're just going to rub that. And you're just rubbing it initially just to wake it up. And then another way is you can bring your leg up and go to your sit bone and then come towards the inside. And that side's a little tender on me. And just, give it a little rub if you can, or just a little pull like that, just so that way you're waking it up. And then
I just want to mention to people, if they're standing up with the leg on the chair, to really just lean the waist forward, because that will really expose the sit bone so they can hook around it. When I have my torso more upright, my glutes kind of push my hand out from hooking around it. So I get more access here.
That's a good point. Very good point. Good. So let's go ahead and get into position, bending the hips and knees. And again, if you want, you can rub, tap, or even just place a hand on your hip insertion, which is right here. So here's the pubic bone. If you go out just a little bit, you can see my fingers. That's where that's at. And then another hand on the greater trochanter. If you can balance all that. If not, hold on to something nearby. So hips and knees slightly flexed. And slide your heel out and in and out. And I can feel my, the side that I'm not doing, how it's having to work a little bit harder. Isn't that interesting? Feel it more in the calf. And out, slide apart, slide together, and slide apart, and slide together, and apart, and together. Slide apart and together. And now I'm starting to feel it in the side that I'm not doing in the quads and the adductors.
And
you don't want to do it too long if it starts hurting.
Yeah, we don't want to build up too much tension in the supporting leg. We want to be able to release tension and really get full range of motion between internal rotation and external rotation of the hip.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that feels amazing in my posture.
You know where I notice it?
Where?
My jaw is so relaxed. I feel
really?
like my neck is long and my jaw is relaxed.
Wow. It's amazing how when you support the pelvic floor, how everything else in the body just feels so supported. And then standing on one leg compared to the other. Oh, and even just lifting that leg, I just feel whoosh, so supported. How about hamstring leg?
My hamstrings are so free right now. I love it. I went for a jog on the boardwalk this morning. So
yeah,
I love that, after I'm feeling so limber and loose right now.
Great.
This is a great cool down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got a little exercise using, I'm going to put socks on for this, but okay. So we can bring awareness to our obturator internus into squatting. So you're going to want to have socks on. And if you're on carpet, you want to go to a floor surface where you can slide. So we're going to start with the knees turned in. Knees and feet turned in. So an internal rotation. And we're going to squat down. And that's going to be our lengthening. And then as we stretch our legs, we're going to slide our heels together, going into external rotation. So bending the knees, internal rotation, letting that obturator lengthen, and then sliding together as we bring the heels together and stretch the legs. So internal rotation, external rotation, internal rotation, and external rotation. And if we wanted to take it one step further, when we go into external rotation, we could also rise up onto the toes into releve. So we come down, internal rotation, external rotation, heels together, rise up into releve. I lost my balance on that one. Rising up into releve. Really thinking about full motion of the obturator. Sliding together and all the way together as we rise up into releve. Let's do one more time.
Wow. That last time, I just felt like my pelvic floor was just so comfortable to be in that position.
I'm just noticing a nice postural sway right now. It sort of feels a little bit like my pelvis is kind of playing ping pong, but like very gently. But then like there's also like a figure eighting aspect to it, but not a consistent figure eight in one direction. It's like it goes a little one way, then it wiggles and again a figure eight the opposite direction.
Can you imagine doing the hula hoop right now?
I just was thinking the hula hoop.
And the other way too?
Yeah, because I was just thinking, oh, it's like my pelvis wants to circle. It wants to hula hoop. Yes.
Right. Or what about a figure eight?
Or a figure eight.
And then start at a different position. One position you start at the right and the other one you start at the left. You know where I felt it was in my neck. As soon as I stood and felt my posture, I just feel this nice support in my neck. I feel like it wants to affect my voice in a really positive way.
That's a great thing to notice, that by doing work on the pelvic floor, we can get nice neck support rather than what a lot of people think about neck support as being tension in the upper traps and tension in the shoulders. So I'm so glad that you brought that up.
And I wonder, when I feel that way, I tend to have a forward head posture.
But who doesn't have a forward head posture in today's technology world?
That's true. But look at my neck after doing that. Does it look like it's less forward?
I think your posture looks great. And I think what's great about it is that you don't have to think about holding the head back and dropping the chin, that it gave you the support from the pelvis. So that happened automatically rather than naturally, rather than using tension to position here. Anytime we hold a position, we're using tension to do that. So we want it to happen naturally and flow through the body so that we use exactly what's required.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. And that's what I love so much about the Franklin method, is how we're not having a forced movement. In traditional therapy, people will say, well, you have a forward head posture, so you need to just drop your chin slightly and bring it back. So then you're walking around like this, really tight. Everything tenses up because you're working so hard to do something that's not natural for you. But I love the support of the pelvic floor, both concentrically and eccentrically. So in a supportive and also a relaxed type of scenario, and how that supports my neck.
And we really gave it a full range of motion, a full range of motion. And we weren't squeezing the pelvic floor and doing Kegels. We were letting the sit bones move, and we were using imagery, and we were following the sit bones and the imagery.
I love the hula hoop and the figure eights. So good for our dancing.
So I think we have a few more exercises, don't we?
We do. Yeah, you were going to do another one.
So we have we're still dancing here. So we're going to come back to the plie. So if you have a chair, what you're going to do is you're going to put one leg up on the chair. And here is where we're really going to focus on the adductors and their connection into the pubic bone, but also here we're thinking about our sit bones going apart and lengthening and then coming back together. So sliding apart, sliding together, sliding apart, sliding together. And what I'm going to add on my bottom foot is as I come up, I'm going to rotate the thigh in now. So I'm going to go into external rotation as I come down and internal rotation as I come up. And the last thing that I'll add on to this is reaching up and across with the arm. Just going to slide back a little bit so I can get into the full range so you guys can see that. So external rotation as we go down, internal rotation and reach the arm across. Then external rotation, lengthen. And then let the sit bones come back together and reach across the body with the arm. Here the flower blooms, then the petals close, and you reach. And if you can really think about there being a connection from your foot, through your leg, into your pelvis, and through your torso and arm. So from the floor, throughout the torso, through your arm. We'll do that one more time. Sliding apart as we go down, sliding together. And I'm checking in on my right side of the body. And the first thing I noticed was kind of just my arm felt so long and heavy and my shoulder relaxed. And I also felt like my glutes are so relaxed as well. Like one side, my butt kind of feels a little bit gripped up and on the other feels full and relaxed. How about you, Deborah?
Did you see what I did? So I brought my hands down. I felt like it was longer. You mentioned longer. I thought, oh, I wonder if mine's longer. And then I put my hands together and look at. That's the difference in length.
It sure is.
Feels amazing. And right away, I just noticed a better lift in my posture. How could it get better after it was already feeling so good? Each movement that we did, it felt better and better, and it's continuing to improve. That's the beauty of it.
So let's do the other side.
Absolutely.
And so here, when we bend down, we're thinking about lengthening sit bone to sit bone, sliding apart, then sliding together. And I really like to model the hands. I'm imagining that I have your elastic band in between my hands and I'm sliding apart, getting that nice stretch, sliding together.
And I like to exaggerate the movements with my hands.
And one thing that we haven't mentioned as we're doing this is that, of course, we're always breathing. And in Franklin method, we kind of let breathing just happen behind the scenes. We're letting the breath flow freely. In exercises, there's many different ways to coordinate breath, but we're really letting the breath happen. So you may find that you're inhaling and then you're exhaling as you come up, but perhaps it's the opposite. It's okay however you are breathing. So we're going to get the external rotation as we go down, the internal rotation as we come up, and reach across the body. And the reach can be on different angles. It doesn't have to be one particular angle. You can reach overhead. It could be more across the body on a diagonal. External rotation, internally rotating the leg as you come up and reach. Think about the connection from the ground, through the leg, into the pelvis, through the waist and the arm. So it's really dynamic, full body strengthening.
And I noticed too that this side needs more support, so I'm holding on.
And you can add, I love that you're showing the holding on and the support. Feel free to hold on, use whatever support that you need. So we'll finish up this last side, and then we'll check back in. I'm going to do my pelvic floor contraction with the hands on the greater trochanters. Sense that.
Feels stronger.
I got the image of just a zipper and like really like central, like internal. And because my glutes feel so relaxed right now, I had that sensation, but everything else around the legs was sort of just draped. So it's a really cool feeling to feel that draping.
That is awesome. That's beautiful. And I love that you brought up about the breathing. That's so important to not feel like you have to force breathing in, breathing out at certain times during these movements, just to breathe naturally, and the breath will take care of itself. And I noticed as I was doing it that my left leg was starting to feel a little bit weak. And then I realized I better hold on. But it's so nice to be able to have that external support while I'm doing it, and then to receive the benefit. And I just feel so much more lifted again in my posture. Feel like I have the perfect spine.
That's great. Where when I started, my right side was so dominant and overpowering, I didn't feel much at all on the opposite side. And so that has quieted down. So things overall feel softer, yet more symmetrical. So I love that.
Yeah, I love it too.
Well, this was so great today, Deborah. I'm so glad that we did this practice and that we've shared with you guys this dynamic approach to pelvic floor training that doesn't involve just sitting and doing Kegels or standing and doing Kegels. It involves full body movement, watching our emotions and our self-talk and sensing our feet. So it's really a whole body, holistic approach.
Yeah, so it was all encompassing, right? Head to toe.
Head to toe. And I just love the way I feel right now, and to be able to walk away from a practice and to feel so good and so balanced, that I'm so excited about that and just grateful to share that with you.
Absolutely. And my breath feels so full and awesome. Easy, very easy to breathe. So yes, what a beautiful time we had today. And thank you so much for joining us. We love being able to share this with you and want you to have the same experiences as well. And I really hope that you get to achieve that today. And Solange, it was so wonderful working with you as always.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would leave us a review. You can also become a patron of the podcast. Join our patron program to get access to movement practices from each episode, bonus episodes, and Q&As where we answer any questions you have about the practices. We look forward to practicing with you and continuing to share our passion. As we say in the Franklin Method, better information leads to better navigation. Keep practicing, and we'll see you next time.